worldwide studies have shown, Mr. Gakuo actually talked about 1 in 4 people have mental illness. And interestingly, 23% of them are Black or Black British, compared to 17% the white British experiencing common mental health problem. And studies have found that a lot of people turn to church, of course, in their faith. And of course, I've also talked about stigma. Mr. Gaku also talked about stigma, which is a major issue in around mental illness in the church, and the culture of silence, which I've already talked about when I was explaining what the clergy shared with me, and even what the congregant shared with me. And then there are also a lot of misguided attitudes, and where the congregants will feel like they're suffering, and they don't want to be ashamed, they don't want to be blamed, and they also feel unsupported. So this is roughly what mental health looks like in the church. Now, another survey that was done amongst 1,000 pastors showed that there is a disconnect between the knowledge and the action to support the congregants. Some pastors may know about mental illness, but they may not be well equipped. So one of the issues was there's lack of training for the leaders in the church on how to recognize mental illness. So that could explain why they don't want to talk about it, because they really don't understand what it is. And then there are few churches that have any plans to assist families that are affected by mental illness. So they can support from the spiritual perspective, but when it comes to mental illness, and we have different categories, different types of mental illness, they may not even know how to assist. And then very few churches are staffed with counselors who are skilled in mental illness. So if you're, as a church, you're lucky to have a counselor who is trained to handle mental illness, that's just 1 in very few. So that means the congregants may not be able to get the professional help that they need. Then studies have also shown that there are several opinions on why mental illness is still a taboo topic in the church. Why don't the leaders want to talk about it? Why aren't the congregants talking about it? We talked about stigma earlier on. So, and Mr. Gakuo put these points very, very clearly. Mental illness can sometimes be seen or perceived as a sign of weakness. Others may ask, why aren't you just surrendering this to God? Isn't your faith strong enough? Some may tell you this could just be a way of God testing your faith. So just hang in there, sister. And Mr. Gakuo talked about, if you're a man, you'll be told, man up. If you're a woman, you'll be told, just pray, my sister, fight your battles on your knees. And then some people may even look at mental illness as a punishment for the sins that maybe you have committed in the past. A case in point is this congregant that I was working with. At some point, she was asking me, could God be punishing me for something that I did? And of course, I had to reassure her that, that's not the God we serve. That's not the God we serve. No, it's not punishment for any of the sins that you have committed. And some Christians may also look at you like you're a bad Christian, you're not a strong enough Christian, you're a disappointment, and so on and so forth. So these are just some of the opinions on why mental illness could still be a taboo topic in our churches. People don't want to face it. So I'm just wondering, I'm just putting the question out there, which of these challenges have you or those around you experienced, and which ones are different from the examples I've shared, from what Mr. Gakuo shared, and from what these opinions, what rings a bell with you with regard to your own mental wellness, or somebody you know, a family member or a friend or a fellow congregant, and which ones are different. So maybe we can just put them in the chat, then we'll address them when we have our Q&A session. So that's just something I want us to think about even as we are going on. So I have mentioned that one of the things that is out there, one of the discrepancies that is out there, is that there's lack of awareness on what mental health is or what mental illness is. I'll borrow from WHO that defined mental health as a state of well-being where an individual is able to realize their own abilities. That calls for awareness. Are we aware of our ability? Can we cope with the normal stresses of life? And of course, we can never escape stresses of life. Day to day, we meet different stressors. Can we work productively in whatever line of work? Are we a student? Are we able to perform? Are we working in the offices? Are we able to perform? And are we able to make a contribution to our community in one way or another, in the way that is expected of us? So WHO defines, that's what it defines mental health as. And it also mentions that it is more than the absence of mental disorders. I mentioned earlier that we have so many mental disorders. You know, we are talking depression, anxiety, PTSD. If you go to the others, schizophrenia, ADHD, all that, even substance use and abuse. The fact that we are not diagnosed with mental disorder doesn't mean that we are mentally healthy. So that's why that statement is there. It's more than the absence of a mental disorder. Then Mr. Gaku also mentioned something that was very important: no health without mental health. That should be our mantra. That is something we should really keep at heart, to know that even if our other aspects of life is going on well, if our mental health is not catered for, is not good, is not reasonable, then we cannot claim good health. So no health without mental health. And I am sure we've come about the wellness wheel, maybe in our interaction with literature, material reading, online, it's replete with the information. So this wellness wheel confirms the fact that we cannot have health or full health without our mental health being okay. You can see we have different aspects of it. So I'm just wondering, how are we? So maybe we can question ourselves, how are we faring on our wellness wheel? Where are we physically? Where are we socially, intellectually, environmentally, occupationally, spiritually, and which leads to the emotional well-being? So that's just a question that I would like us to ask ourselves and just to ponder over. And this is important because we are called upon, even as Christians, to, Christ came so that we could have life abundantly. And if we're not whole, then we cannot have abundance. We cannot live our lives in abundance if one aspect of our life is affected. So this is just something I wanted us to think about, even as we are remembering that there is no health without mental health. So why are we having these conversations? Why does mental health really matter? Why does it matter? Why is it important that we have this conversation, that we talk about mental health? And the statistics, again, is one major reason that we should really talk about mental health with our children, with our spouses, with our congregants, with our friends. In our society, we should have this conversation because we've seen that 1 in every 5 adults. So even in our gathering here, I don't know how many we are, but if you look at that statistic, then that means that one or two of us could be suffering from a common mental disorder. And then we have also major mental disorders, where we are saying between 1 to 7% of adults and between 10 to 20 children and adolescents suffer from major mental disorders. So for that reason, mental health matters. And then the other reason why mental health matters, and the reason why we should have this conversation, is the fact that half of all mental illnesses begin by the age of 14. Imagine, by the age of 14. So this means that half of the people who are suffering from mental illness, they will not lead a full life because they will be, hindered by mental illness even as they are struggling to get to their adulthood. So it's important that we have this conversation. Then the other point that Sagakuo mentioned was that it's been found to be a leading cause of disability worldwide. So imagine 1/3 of all the years that people have lived with disability can be attributed to mental illness. So that's another reason why we need to have this conversation. And then the other thing that really surprised me is that mental illness actually reduces life expectancy by 10 to 20 years. Imagine. So instead of living up to maybe 70, if you have mental illness, your life is curtailed at 20, at 50, for example. That is sad. And then finally, if you look at for those who have interacted with people who have gone through who are suffering from mental illness, you can identify with the human suffering that comes with mental illness. Imagine somebody who is dealing with someone who has depression. Imagine somebody who is dealing with someone who is taking care of someone who has suicidal ideation or thoughts or tendency. Or even imagine someone a mother who has to deal with a child who has ADHD, a mother who has to deal with a child who has schizophrenia, or even a spouse who has to deal with the other spouse who has some mental illness. So it causes a lot of human suffering. So for these reasons, we need to really have a serious conversation. We need to open up to have open conversations about mental health. And then the other important reason why we need to talk about mental illness, mental wellness, is the fact that it is progressive. It rarely hits at once. It sneaks in slowly by slowly. And because sometimes we don't recognize the symptoms, the signs and symptoms, we let it progress. Sometimes we don't recognize, sometimes we don't know what to do about it, we let it progress. So it comes in stages. The stage 1, mild symptoms and warning signs. Stage 2, the symptoms are increasing in frequency and severity, and they start interfering with an individual's life. Stage 3, the symptoms worsen and there's relapsing and recurring, and then there is serious disruption in the life activities. And this is where somebody will even drop out of college. If they're going to college, someone will have to stop working. Someone will, the businesses will close down. And I personally, I can identify with stage 3 in so many aspects of my life. There's a time my business actually collapsed because of the major life events that I was going through and some mental illness issues that I had to deal with. And then if we don't look at it, if we don't address it, then we get into stage 4, which now most of the time incapacitates us, and we have to seek medical help from, for example, a psychiatrist. And, we are basically, our lives are jeopardized. We could lose our lives through maybe even suicide or, other things. If it is substance abuse, we could overdose and so on. So you can see why we really need to have conversation. So mental health matters, mental wellness matters. We really need to have serious conversations around it. So one of the things I mentioned earlier that could be the reason why the church is still, there's still some silence in the church, and even in the general population. Actually, there's still quite some stigma, not just in the church. One of the reasons could be that people don't understand the early warning signs, and some of these signs, actually, what happens is they happen to us, and we take them as just the ups and downs of life. And people move on and people go on until now, maybe we reach stage 3 is when we realize, hey, this is serious. So some of the signs that we can, even as congregants, when we are taking care of the other people around us, as clergy, as friends, as parents, as brothers, as sisters, these are some of the warning signs that we can look out for. So if suddenly you see that your concentration levels have gone down, you're no longer able to concentrate on the work that you're doing, your memory, you keep, there's something wrong with your memory, and you can't think clearly, you need to maybe check what's going on. If your appetite suddenly changes, either you're overeating or you've lost appetite, you need to question what's going on. If you're not able to complete your tasks, for example, if it is school, you're somebody, maybe you're a student and you used to be so diligent, and suddenly you can't, you're finding it so difficult. Or if you're somebody who is employed, you used to be somebody who completes their tasks on a daily basis, but suddenly you're lagging behind, your boss is on your case all the time. You need to question what's really going on. Another warning sign is you're continuously worried, all the time worried. And of course, maybe feeling anxious, or just anxious about things all the time. That's something to think about. And if you find yourself always feeling sad, empty, hopeless, or worthless, you're even questioning, why am I even on this earth? What am I even doing? I'm not valued. When you start having those kind of thoughts, then you need to question the status of your mental wellness. If you become too sensitive to sound, sight, smell, or touch around you, and then also you become irritable and restless, then that is something to look out for. And then if you find yourself losing interest in the things that you used to love, for example, in the church, if you see maybe a sister who used to love choir and they were at the front leading the choir, they would never miss any choir practice, for example, and suddenly you're not seeing them, or they come to church late, or they don't come to church at all, please reach out to that sister and find out what's going on. They've lost interest in what they used to love doing. Then you find people also withdraw from others. If you've not seen a congregant for a while, reach out, find out what's going on. If you've not seen or heard from a friend of yours for a while, reach out to them, find out, hey, what's up, what's going on? I've not heard from you. I'm not seeing you. Nowadays, people meet online. If you're not seeing somebody who was very active, suddenly they've gone quiet. Find out what's going on. And if you also find yourself hearing voices that other people are not hearing, or seeing things that other people are not seeing, then that is time to really check on your mental wellness. And then you find yourself again, you may find yourself also just lethargic, losing energy, your sleep patterns are changing, either you are oversleeping or undersleeping. So that is again something to look out for. So there are also some signs that you need to take action on immediately, like as soon as. Now this calls for emergency. Anytime you're talking to somebody, or you know somebody, or you hear somebody who has plans of harming themselves in any way, hurting themselves or hurting another person, more often than not, you'll hear it in undertones of, I wish I was not even there. I wish I could disappear. Those are the first statements that will come. Or I wish I could just die. So those are some of the statements that you could hear, because people will normally verbalize some of these things. Or if you see somebody hurting themselves, amongst our young people today, you will see them self-harming by doing things like cutting. They'll cut themselves, they'll wear long sleeves so that you don't ever get to see the cuts. So that's an act of self-harming. That is a warning sign that needs immediate attention. And then the hearing of voices or seeing things that are not there, that also needs immediate attention. If you find yourself, your thought process is changing, your speech or writing changing, that also needs immediate attention, because that could mean there's something seriously wrong going on. If you find yourself also being paranoid, being suspicious and fearful, like you're there and you're thinking somebody's coming to kill me, there are people after me, that is called paranoia. If that has come on you, suddenly, then that is something you need to address. Go seek medical help. And then if you see a serious drop in your schoolwork or performance, also that calls for an emergency attention. And then you may also see a sudden change in personality. In someone you used to know who did things, who was happy, jolly, somebody who was outgoing, then suddenly, they're withdrawn, they're irritable, a sudden personality change, or something, they're doing things that are out of character. That is the time. So these ones that I've mentioned, these signs that I'm talking about, these ones call for immediate attention, and they need psychiatric help. They need psychiatric attention, not even as psychologists. They need psychiatric management. So you need to refer them to a hospital where there's a psychiatrist. These other ones, you can actually maybe work with them and help them to see maybe a psychologist, or get them to talk to somebody, or help them to open up to talk to you about what's going on. So then we can also ask ourselves, so where does mental illness come from? You know, if we're saying 1 in 7 people have mental illness, 1 in 5 people have mental illness, 23%, you know, all these statistics, where does mental illness come from? So in the psychological field, we have, you know, psychologists have tried to explain the causes of mental illness over the years. So they've found different causes. There are some mental illnesses that can be caused by just one thing, like maybe it could be genetics, but it's triggered maybe by the social. Something like schizophrenia has been found to be related to a genetic cause. So that's what we call biological. So biological is anything that is physical in our body: genetics, disease, injury, hormones, diet, exercise. So how, maybe you can ask, exercise, how does that, how can that lead to mental illness? Lack of it, for example, can lead to mental illness, because maybe you can become obese and then you become anxious, or become self-aware, then you start self-loathing, your self-esteem drops, then you get into depression, or you get into anxiety, social anxiety, and so on and so forth. So substance use, drugs can also lead to mental illness, abuse of, you know, drugs and alcohol. So those are the things that affect our physiology, our biology, you know, the blood, the hormones, you know, the fluids in our body, the brain, and so on. Then we have another cause, which is the social, our social upbringing, our family, our relationships, poverty, school, there's media, especially social media today, has been highly linked to certain mental illnesses such as anxiety, depression, low self-worth. Then things like culture can also affect how we respond to mental illness. Our work situation, how stressful is it? The other stresses in our life, traumas, some of the traumas that we've gone through in our upbringing, maybe early childhood traumas, or even the traumas we're going through in life, can also be a cause of mental illness. Discrimination. And, you know, when I look at culture and discrimination, for example, I do not know, because you are the people who have lived, like for you guys who live in the UK, I just want to imagine that the change of culture could be an, you know, something that starts up certain thought processes, because the way we look at our interactions here could be so different with the way people interact in the UK, for example. Aspects of discrimination. You've come from your country, your home country, where we are all Black. So nobody's looking at you as different. So when you go there, when you go to the UK, you may face aspects of discrimination that can trigger a thought process that can actually lead to one developing mental illness. Then we have psychological causes, where now we're looking at the beliefs, the emotions, how resilient we are, our coping skills, emotional intelligence, the cognitive biases that we form, our own behavior, then even our own IQ. So, for example, the cognitive biases, another thing maybe I could imagine, I'm not saying this is it, but I could imagine, like the Kenyan setup. We were colonized by the white people, for example, from the English, and we have grown up with a cognitive bias against the white people, for example. And when you go now and live amongst them, how is that for you? How are you interacting with that? Because we may still have some baggage there that we may have to deal with. So those are just some of the things that interact. The other important thing that I want to mention about this biopsychosocial model, all these factors interact. No one single factor acts alone to cause mental illness or to cause mental or to lead to or to improve our mental wellness. So there is quite some interaction between these three major categories or major groups of factors. So these are just some of the, this is just a model to help us understand. So the way, for example, the biological factors and the psychological factors and the social factors will interact for one individual, even if, for example, you have two siblings in the same family, you may find these factors interacting for them totally differently because of their difference, the fact that they're a different person. So one person may develop anxiety and the other one may not develop, yet they've been brought up with more or less the same environmental factors. So the interaction, which people still can't understand, how do you pick, how do they pick each other to cause that, to lead to mental illness. So that is, I just wanted to help us understand that, and because of this, nobody is immune from mental illness. So you can't sit back and say that, hey, I'm fine, I'm resilient, I can never suffer from mental illness. No, none of us is immune from mental illness because of the way these factors interact. So this is just a chart that I found that explains some of the things that I've already talked about. For example, you guys who are now in the UK, some of the issues that you may be dealing with. Maybe you are here, you had a particular social status. When you go there, you've lost it. You're worrying about the family members that you've left behind. Maybe unemployment. Some may even be dealing with the uncertainty about immigration or refugee status, and even just a family adaptation. So some of these issues post-migration, once you've settled there, could actually be a trigger for, could fall in one of the categories. And then pre-migration factors, maybe the background that you had, trauma, I mentioned trauma, could also now interact with other factors to lead to psychological illnesses. So it's sometimes very difficult to put a finger on one particular factor that can lead to psychological illnesses because there are so many factors that interact. And then I think I've talked about culture, where it depends on how you are brought up and how you perceived mental illness, for example, or mental wellness. When you move to a different culture or cultural, orientation, you're exposed to a new culture, then that may change because you may not see things the same way. They are not seeing things the same way. The way we express ourselves in Kenya is different. The way we were interacting was different. So when you go there, you find things a bit different. So I'm just wondering, even from what we have shared, what I have shared, what Mr. Gakuo shared, and even the causes of, for example, mental illness, and the past experiences that you've had, could there be factors related to migration or other factors that are not even related to migration that may have affected your mental health or the mental health of the people around you, your friend, your spouse, your child, your fellow church member, or anybody you interact with in the community? So I want us just to think about this. And if there's anything you want to contribute, you can contribute in the on the chat. Then we can talk about it during the Q&A. If you have any questions so far, you can write it down or write it in the chat. Then we'll look at it. So so I want to stop there. I just wanted us to have an idea what mental illness is, what signs and symptoms to watch out for, and what mental wellness is, so that when we see people in the community, or even as when we start experiencing these symptoms, we don't dismiss them, because I would not want us to get to stage 4 or even stage 3. If we talk about these issues when they are at stage 1 and stage 2, then we are able to arrest mental illness before it happens to us. So I will now hand over to Sylvia to continue from there, and I want us to look at, what does the Bible say about mental illness? were there people with mental illness in the Bible that were mentioned? How did they handle it? What hope do we have as Christians? How can we integrate mental health in church and still not compromise our spirituality? How do we integrate these two so that we don't feel like we are, like we are less of Christians? We don't feel shamed, we don't feel stigmatized. Is it possible for us to open up so that everybody can feel at home in the church, to open up enough to share what they are going through? So I want to hand over to Sylvia so that she can take us through the next session of this presentation. Sylvia, are you there? I will stop sharing now. I hope you're able to share.
Yeah, thank you, Preskilla.
Can I stop sharing so that you share your screen?
Yes, please. If I will not be able to share, you'll help me, but you can stop so that I see if I can share.
All right. Thank you. Welcome. You can take it over.
Okay. Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
That's when it affects you. So just underline that again. I think that's an important point.
Very well said, Mr. Gakuo. Very well said. In fact, one of the things that goes fast is self-care. Especially amongst the adolescents. One of the things that goes fast is self-care. You will see them, they'll not even probably get out of bed to bathe. If somebody was meticulous about how they look, they'll start, just appearing shabby. They don't care anymore. Yeah. So, and I like the point that you've put across that, we cannot avoid stress. I mean, life will throw curveballs at us at any one point, and they come in different forms, some heavy, some so painful. But how we navigate, that is what will determine whether we are okay and we are mentally well or not. Because look at a case where maybe you've lost somebody, like it's okay to grieve, it's okay to feel the pain, it's okay to weep, it's okay to mourn, and it's okay to go through the grief period. And now, when this goes on for a period of time, then people will start getting concerned. And the one thing about mental illness or mental disorders, I talked about diagnosable mental illness. When we're diagnosing, we give time frames. We give time frames. For example, depression. I'm not calling depression after a week of poor self-care or, just a week. No, there is a time frame of 2 weeks of having certain symptoms for maybe more than 3 or 4 times a week, or a whole day. So so that's why when I was talking about clinical psychology, we are very keen on assessment, so that we don't get to label people, so that we don't get to alarm people. So we can even go through acute stress because of something that has hit us so hard. But how do we get out of it? The coping. Are we able to, pull ourselves out of it and move on? Acknowledge that, hey, this was hard. This was painful. It is still painful. Yes, but I am managing. Yeah. So you're very right, and I like the point that you have brought across.
If are you able to share whatever you wanted, Sylvia?
Are you able to see my screen?
Not yet.
Not yet. Okay, okay. A minute, please.
Okay. Somebody can ask another question, maybe a quick question before, if there is, as we wait for Sylvia to share her screen.
The other option could be, Sylvia, if it's not working, if you send us your presentation as an email, we can set it up from our side.
Are you able to see my screen now?
No.
No.
We're still seeing you, not the screen you're sharing.
No,
We're still seeing you. Do you want me to share for you?
Please share for me, because I'm trying to share and I can't.
Are you guys seeing my screen?
Yeah.
Okay.
We can
Sylvia,
see
there you are.
We can see the presentation. Okay, so yes, there we go.
Yeah. There you are, Sylvia. Sylvia, are you there?
I'm there, but I think I have problems with whatever, with
the connection.
Yeah, just a
can
little.
Can you see my screen? Can you see what I'm sharing?
Yes, I can see now.
Okay, so
Yeah.
take it up.
Yes, so thank you, Preskilla, and everyone. We have had a good discussion about mental illness, and even as we share about mental illness, as people of the faith and as Christians, we always want to draw our knowledge, our understanding from the good book that guides us. And so many a times as Christians, we may ask ourselves, what is this mental illness? I mean, what does the Bible say about mental illness? Is it even something that is considered serious in the Bible? And what does the Bible say? And from my perspective, if I would share about mental illness in the Bible, one thing I would want to share with us is that although the Bible does not explicitly call those names as we call them today, you hear about anxiety, mental illnesses such as depression, bipolar, and what have you. Even though the Bible does not explicitly name those mental illnesses as such, but we have evidence that the Bible really, when it was written, the Bible depicts that there is suffering. And we all know that people with mental illness suffer, different kinds of suffering. If we look at what is said in the book of Isaiah 61 about Jesus saying that he was sent to come and give good news to the poor and just relieve those who are held captive and those who are struggling with oppression. These are some of the things that really people with mental illnesses go through. They struggle. It's a struggle. I mean, there's someone who says that the mind can sink deeper or lower than the body. And it becomes very difficult for this person even to come out of this situation. And that is some kind of oppression. And it is an oppression that many a times people around those who have mental illness do not understand. They do not understand it at all. Somebody has sunk lower than their body. They're in some kind of pit and they're not able to come out. And the people around them don't even realize that they're in that kind of pit. But this is what Jesus Christ is saying in Isaiah 61. We also give an example of the Gerasene demoniac. This is one practical example. This is one that is almost tangible, that every person who has read the Bible would remember. This Gerasene demoniac who was not able to be restrained by anyone. He was self-harming. He had a lot of strength. People could not restrain him, and he was living in the tomb. Today, if we look at the way this person was presenting himself, then we could talk about the bipolar disorder. And at that point in time, when Jesus met him, it looks like he was suffering what we call mania, that is associated with bipolar disease, or bipolar disorder, sorry, or the mental health problem that we call the bipolar. And I believe we know what bipolar is. It is characterized by extremely excited. This person is extremely excited sometimes, and sometimes is extremely depressed. And when they are in the situation where they are presenting the mania, you realize that these people have a lot of strength. You cannot restrain them. They are overexcited, and they can do so much harm at that point in time. So that is just an example of the fact that even as we are talking about mental illness, we are not talking about something that the Bible does not refer to. Although the Bible may not talk exactly, use the same names that we are using today, but we can still find some of the things that we are talking about today in the Bible. And even as we move forward, I like the fact that Preskilla had talked about causes of mental illness earlier. And when she was talking about causes of mental illness, she mentioned biological causes, which are physical in nature. And so that means that mental illness can be a physical issue. In fact, it is a physical issue. And one of the reasons why we say it is a physical issue is that this is illness that affects the brain. And I would just say that the brain is part of our body, just as our hands, just as the heart is, that's just as our legs are. And even as we look at that, we realize that sometimes mental illnesses could come as a consequence of corruption of God's good and perfect creation, which is our bodies. And the corruption of our bodies may not necessarily come from ourselves. Sometimes what happens in the brain that makes it not function the way it's supposed to function may not be because I did something. but something happened because we live in a corrupted world. And since there was the fall, the world is corrupted. And if we read these verses, we may find how the Bible tells us that the world is corrupted, our bodies are corrupted, we are living in a corrupted world after the fall. And so physical illness, mental illness could come because our bodies have been corrupted, maybe by sickness. Our bodies have been corrupted, maybe by things like substance abuse and so on. And even as we move forward, we also realize that people like King David, Job, Elijah, if you read these books, you realize that there was a lot of despair, there was a lot of anger, depression, and loneliness. I remember Elijah when he was being really hunted by Jezebel. He reached a point in time as a human being that he was so low. He even said that he wanted to die. And today we could say that was a condition, a situation where he wanted to be suicidal. There was despair. In the book of Psalms, David talks about how he is desperate because of the so many things that were happening in his life. And because of these things, we need to take care of people who are having mental illness. And the physical care could help so much. The physical care could help so much because some of the times what is happening to us physically will affect our mental health. And so if we get physical care, then we are able even to reduce the intensity of the despair, the anger, the depression, or the loneliness that we may feel, either because we are sick, either because something happened in our lives. And that we get from the parable of the Good Samaritan that we get in the book of Luke, chapter 10, verse 34. The Good Samaritan was able to help the person who was sick or who was injured. And because there was physical help to the person's physical needs, the person was able to heal. And that is the same way we can help people with mental illness. So this is something that should not be strange in the church, because the Bible depicts that these things happen and we should be able to help, because really that is the reason why the church is there. Jesus Christ moved around the places that he was moving, preaching the gospel, helping people, and he also helped people with mental illness. And that is basically what the church is expected to do. So we are not as a church there to look at people who have mental illness and not help them, but we are supposed to help them. And then there is this issue of taking medication for mental illness, because we believe that it is also a physical issue. It can be dealt with also physically through taking medication. But then there is a question that is always asked or goes around in Christian circles about people taking medication when they are mentally ill. And the question that begs every day is it a lack of faith in the ability of God to heal? That is something that people have always posed. And Preskilla, discussing with us earlier, was talking about people could be asking around or telling people who are mentally ill, do you have faith that God can heal you? Or are you not really praying enough? Those are some of the questions that come around in our congregations when people are faced with mental illness. Is it really true that when we take medication, it's a lack of faith? On my side, I believe it is not lack of faith for people to take medication for mental illness. Why is this so? Medication is something that God has given people so that we are able to help. God's help comes in different ways, I suppose. It could come directly from God himself. It also comes through people. And that's why we see the Good Samaritan helping that person who was injured, who was beaten by thugs. I mean, he could also have gotten help directly from God. God would have just removed him from that place and healed his wounds. But that was not what he wanted to do. He wanted the help to come through another human being, maybe to teach us that we are here to help one another. And so that really points out to the fact that there are people who will get help through medication, but there are also those people who will get help maybe by God healing them directly. And if we talk about faith, we know in the book of Hebrews 11 that says that faith is the substance of the things that we are hoping for, and the substance of things that we have not seen. And so we cannot say that we do not have faith because we are not taking medication. Mental illness also, could we move to the next slide?
Mm-hmm.
Yes, thank you. Mental illness can also be a spiritual issue. We could ask ourselves as Christians, are there certain things that we are struggling with as a result of maybe what we have done, maybe disobedience and sin? There are so many things that happen in our lives. You could have done something, and maybe the worry that people could know what you have done could push you to the extent that you develop anxiety, you become depressed to the extent that you move to a point where you become mentally ill. Some of the times there are things that happen to us that we have no control over. Issues of life that just happen without us knowing. These things can push us to becoming mentally ill. Or sometimes we have sinned and the Spirit has convicted us, and the conviction is so overwhelming that sometimes we feel grief and despair. Or sometimes we feel as if we may not find any help because of what we have done, that maybe God would not want to listen to us. And I believe sometimes when people think that God would not want to listen to them, it is because of the stigma that surrounds what people do. Sometimes if people are not able to listen to you, or people have stigmatized you, or people do not want to associate with you for one reason or another, then sometimes it is difficult for people to think that God would be able to listen to them. So those are some of the things that we could talk about when we connect mental illness to our spiritual parts or our spiritual issues. So even as we do that, we realize that there is connection between the spiritual and mental illness. We also see a connection between mental illness and the physical body. And before even I deal with promoting mental illness, there is one thing I would like to say about mental illness being so physical that even Preskilla shared earlier, that people with mental illness present with physical symptoms. And these physical symptoms are so real to these people. But the problem that we have found out, even in this counseling cycles, or even when people go to the hospitals, unfortunately, is that people present with physical symptoms, but when they go to the hospitals, the technology that we've been given in the hospitals do not show that these people have those symptoms. A person presenting with anxiety, for example, goes to the hospital, the heart is pounding and pounding and pounding, and they feel like they are not breathing, and they feel like their heart is having, they're almost having a heart attack. I mean, they go to the nurse, and the nurse who checks the high blood pressure tells them, your blood pressure is okay. Their heart is checked, and they're told your heart is perfect. But this feeling that they have is very, very intense. And so when they are told you are fine, there is nothing wrong with you, then the only thing that is remaining is that they say it is all in your head. And this is the beginning of the stigma that people with mental illness usually have. Because people, even the person who has taken you to the hospital, will say, we took him to the hospital, they said, or we took her to the hospital, they said there's nothing wrong with her. And so it becomes a great problem to this person. But this is for us to know that even though the hospitals or the medical whatevers are not able to figure out the pain that this person is feeling, those pains are very real. They are very real. And the people who have gone through mental illness will tell you this, that the pain is very real and it happens. And so even as the Christian community, this is one of the things that we need to understand. We may not know the pain, we may not understand that pain, but if we recognize the fact that that pain is present, then we may be able to help. And in helping, we will be promoting mental health. And so, as Christians, we are also expected to promote mental health, even in the places where we are. The World Health Organization has given a series of things that is expected. And why are we referring to the World Health Organization even as Christians? It is said that all truth is God's truth. The knowledge that is given for us, even the one that is given by World Health Organization, God has brought this knowledge so that it serves us when we are in this world. And so World Health Organization, research, doctors, whoever, the knowledge that they have that is able to help human beings is knowledge from God. So that's why we refer even to the World Health Organization, as they have given out a series of things that we need to do so that we are able to promote health. Early childhood interventions and support to children, very important. What is it as Christians are we doing with our children? How are we taking care of our children? This is very important, because some of the mental illnesses come as a result of how we handle our children in childhood, how our children grow. Are we neglecting them? Are we taking care of them well? Sometimes we are so depressed that we do not remember that we are dealing with children, that even our depression moves and affects our children, and later on maybe they could develop mental illness. Community development programs are important, because people who are less empowered need to be empowered. There are certain things that happen. Socio-economic empowerment are very important. There is poverty. How do we reduce poverty? Is there a way, as the church or as the Christian community, is there a way that we can reduce poverty? Because we all know that poverty, people who are poor actually have high risk of developing mental illness than those who are not poor, because of the kind of life conditions they live in. Are we giving social support to the elderly population, people who are vulnerable? Are we giving them support as a church? Are we promoting mental health in schools? What interventions are we doing? And this is the space where, as an organization where we work with Preskilla, God has given us a chance to promote mental health. We do this through promoting mental health in schools. We have programs that are able to help. For example, we have a program that helps the youth. We call it Building Mind Muscle for the youth. We also have Building Mind Muscles for people in the workplace. We also help women just we help women so that they are able to even cope with daily life problems that they encounter as women, even in their places of work, women in marriage. We also help even men who are in every place where they are. So we have all these programs going on, and this is an example of a way in which we can promote mental health. So for us, we are promoting these as psychologists, but every other person in the church, in the space where we are, is able to promote mental health in one way or another. Just understanding a person who is suffering from mental health, helping them in whichever way you can be able to help them, listening to them without admonishing them, without judging them, is one way of helping. So each and every one of us in the church is expected to help in one way or another to promote mental health. So how can we support someone who is struggling with depression, for example? Because depression, anxiety, those are some of the mental health issues that are so common in our congregation, in our midst, even outside there, as a people who are living in our communities. I'll go through these very fast. One of the things we need to do is to make it clear that you want to help that person without judging them. Some of the times we ask these people questions that they may not even want to answer. You remember, I'll refer to the question that the disciples were asking when Jesus met the blind person. They were asking, who sinned? Whose fault was it? So sometimes when we meet people with mental illness, it sometimes happens that people ask certain questions that they are not supposed to ask. What if those people just asked, how can we help? How can we help? Is a better question to ask than trying to ask what's going on, what happened to you. So make it clear that you want to help them, listen without judging them, offer your support, the one that you can support, but it is always important not to ask questions like, what happened to you? What's wrong with you? You need to collect yourself or do this and that. So those are some of the things that may even make the people who are depressed more depressed. Even before you deal with these people, there is knowledge about depression out there, even in the internet. You can read something and understand what it is so that you do not ask the person directly. So when you understand what's going on with a person, you are better able, or you are better placed to help them, encourage them to seek professional help, or offer to accompany them if they fear going, because sometimes it's difficult even to just wake up and go to seek medical help or professional help. If they're taking medication, help them take their medication. You can also help them with everyday tasks, because sometimes it is very difficult for them to do their tasks. Encourage regular exercise and social activities. Sometimes people who are depressed or people who are going through depression, they like isolating themselves, they like being alone. Reach out for them and help them engage. Encourage them to focus on positives rather than the negatives. And many people who have come out of mental illnesses, issues, are people who are able to focus on the positive rather than the negatives. And sometimes people are not able to focus on the positives because of the people who are around them, in the congregation, at home, where we are. Sometimes we are so focused on the negatives, on the negative things that these people are doing, that they may not even be in a position to focus on what is positive. So even as we help them, we should focus on the positives. There is something positive that we can focus about, we can encourage them so that they do not look at the negatives that are going on at that particular time. Because when we focus on the negatives, what happens is anxiety comes in. We are so anxious, we are so worried, and worry and anxiety just deepens the extent of depression. Then you can seek further help from the emergency services if the people are thinking of self-harm, just like Preskilla said earlier. Items such as medications, sharp objects, things that can harm these people, if we are taking care of them, if we are close to them, we should ensure that they are not somewhere close to these people. And then the person who is taking care of the person who is depressed or supporting them, do take care of yourself too, because if you do not take care of yourself, you may also find yourself getting into that same situation where the person you are taking care of is finding himself or herself. Yeah, that is a general way in which we can help these people. But one thing I would want to say is that the person who is suffering, or the person who is going through a mental problem or a mental health issue, has the experience that the person who is not going through the mental health issue has. So these people have certain experiences that we may not be able to voice, even as psychologists, even as the other person who is taking care of another person. They say that the wearer of the shoe is the one who knows where the shoe pinches. So how can we help fellow congregants? We should be caring for them. And that is what our mission as Christians is, taking care of people. So caring for people means being alert to their physical problems. If there is a physical problem that is presenting itself with the person who is mentally ill, we can offer a hand of help. If it requires medical treatment, then we can see how to help this person to get medical treatment. If it requires a spiritual help, then as Christians, we are there to pray for them, to pray with them, and even to refer them or to point them to Christ. And only when we do this, we will show the love of Christ and how he cared for his people, for the people, and we will be able to help lift one another's burden as we are told by our Savior Jesus Christ. But then, even as I said earlier, the wearer of the shoe is the one who knows where the shoe pinches. The congregants, there's a congregant's view. And you remember the story of the congregant that Preskilla shared? Some of these congregants may not find time, or they fear talking because of stigma that we had talked about earlier. But this is how one congregant says that they could get help from the church or from the Christian community. They say that the church should be a place of safety and community where we need to be honest and feel no shame or judgment. If we remember earlier, the situation that was shared about that congregant, she was feeling that she could not share what problem she was going through because of fear of being judged. So the congregant is just saying that we need, as a church, to be a place of safety, so that when I come to the church, I need to be honest and feel no shame about what I'm going through. Just the way the person who is suffering from malaria, for example, and did not come to church, comes and said, oh, last week I suffered from malaria. The person who is going through cancer can come forward and testify of how God has been working with them through their illness. But sometimes those who are suffering mental illness are not able to do that for fear of being judged. They say, just be available and walk with them. Practice the ministry of presence. Be present and listen and walk with them. Sometimes they just want to say what they are going through, and they just want you to listen. Sometimes they present with lack of interest, even in their friends. You send them a text message, they don't reply. Sometimes you may even talk to them and they don't reply. But they say don't take this personally. Sometimes they are so deep where they are sunk that they do not even have the energy to reply your text, even to talk to you, even to engage in the activities that you used to engage in together. So they're just asking, the congregant is asking, pray with us and for us, and encourage us even to seek professional and medical help if need be. And they're also saying sometimes we provide our opinions on what we think happened or what we think they need to do or how they need to behave. They're saying, please be hesitant to provide your opinion because you're not a mental health expert. Sometimes we give our opinions in places where we are not expected to give our opinions. So be hesitant to give your opinion. Sometimes we don't know what to say, and so because we just want to say something, we look for something and say it, and maybe what we have said will just break the person and make them even their condition worse. And above all, they are saying they would just like to be treated as a fellow image bearer, as a fellow Christian, as a person who has been created in the image of God. Despite their mental illnesses, they're created in the image of God. And that's how God wants them to be. Whether with mental illness or not, that's how God wanted them to be. And that's what they're asking, that you may treat them with with that kind of understanding. And on top of that, there is an open letter that a congregant wrote to his church family. And it is an open letter that has been shared in many spheres. And what a better way to put it, because sometimes it is difficult for people who are not suffering mental illness to really voice out those things that people with mental illnesses are suffering. So I'll just read a letter. It is a letter that was written to a church family of one congregant who really wanted his church family to understand him. And it was shared by permission. So this is an open letter to the church family. Dear church family, I'm writing this letter to you as a plea for understanding, not only for me, but also for others who suffer with similar illnesses. You are my family in the Lord. I love you, and I know you want to be supportive of me. While I cannot speak for every mentally ill person, many of the statements I make are true for others. A few may be unique to me. I believe mental illness is today's leprosy. Even in the church, it is shrouded in silence and isolation. Admitting to having a mental illness is a kind of emotional suicide. Don't talk about it, I've been advised by those closest to me. Deep inside, I know they are right. I did speak out when I was first diagnosed, and I bear the stigma that accompanies mental illness because I did speak. Being quiet now, though, won't erase it. But maybe if I do speak out, someone will understand. Maybe that someone will be you. The most important thing to me is that you accept my mental illness for what it is, an illness, just like any other illness. It hurts me so bad when some of you treat my illness as a character flaw or a sin condition, or as if it is my fault. It is also just as painful too when you pretend that nothing is wrong with me and that if I would just ignore my illness, it would somehow go away. Please don't hold out false hope to me. If I had cancer or diabetes, you won't guarantee me God's healing. Don't promise me that. Don't promise that to me now. I am very aware of God's healing power, but I also know that God may or may not choose to heal me. As with any illness, God may choose to allow me to experience it instead. I know God loves me. I believe his promises are for me, including the one that says, in all things God works for the good of those who love him. Romans 8:28. I do not understand why mental illness is part of my life, but I believe my life is in God's hand. Whatever God chooses for me, I want to give him glory. I am really holding to his hand just as you do. Only that I probably have to cling a little tighter. One thing I really need from you is your prayer support. But all the warning I have been given about keeping quiet makes it hard for me to ask. I do not want to dwell so much on my symptoms, but there are times when I feel overwhelmed by them. And I wish I could tell you so without feeling guilty. You may wonder what to pray for people like me. But I want to tell you, pray that my symptoms will not lead me to sin. Pray for my relationship with my family members and friends because those close to me suffer with me. Also, pray that God will help me to be a consistent Christian despite my illness. Pray that Jesus will be seen in me despite my illness. Of course, pray for my healing, but also pray that God will help me to accept my illness if the healing is not his will for me. Your prayers are the best support you can give me. You may never know the depths to which I might have sunk without them. Being able to serve the Lord is important to me. I owe him a debt of love I can never ever repay. Before you knew I had this illness, I had many opportunities to serve. I am still the same person with the same talents. Or have you lost confidence in me because you know I have an illness? I am still a capable person. Please, please, don't declare me unfit. Instead, I need your support. A mighty outpouring prayer that God will make me equal to any calling or task that he has given me. As with any illness, I may have to limit myself at times in order to protect my health. Please allow me to set my own limits with the help of God, my family, and my doctor. If my symptoms are interfering with my service to the Lord, I will resign. But pray that God will give me a discernment in this area of my life. While I appreciate your understanding, I don't want you to think you must tiptoe around me. I want your empathy, but not your sympathy. When some of you watch me so carefully for signs of illness, I know you mean well, but it only makes me feel like I am under a magnifying glass. Also, everything is not a symptom of illness, nor can everything be blamed on it. One of the most painful things for me is when someone tries to help me control my emotions in front of others. All it does is to add embarrassment to my emotional overload. Telling me to relax or calm down is pointless. Why? Because if I could, don't you think I would have done it? I don't doubt your motives are pure, but my self-esteem is shattered by that kind of help. The best thing you can do if you think I need that kind of help is to tell me privately. The one positive aspect of my illness is creativity that often accompanies it. At times I get overly excited about the ideas I have. One of my greatest frustrations is having my ideas discounted just because of my illness. I would love to be able to present my ideas, but sometimes I find that difficult. If you can look past my emotions, past my illness, you will find many of my ideas good. Please examine them for their own merit and decide whether they are worthy of consideration. Finally, no letter about my illness would be complete without my giving glory to God. for all he has brought me through. Looking back, I can see God's love was reaching out to me, even when I experienced the darkest moments of my life. I don't know what the future holds for me, but I am not afraid because God is with me. My emotions cannot always be trusted, but God can be trusted. I trust my life to Him. Your fellow congregant. That was a long letter, but I believe that as we listen to that letter, then we get a clear picture of what a person suffering from mental illness is going through and what they would want us to do as fellow congregants, as people of the community of Christ. And so, even as we ponder about the things that have been there and thinking about how we can help people with mental illness, what is our comfort as the Christian community? People who are suffering mental illness, people who are taking care of them, people who have not suffered mental illness, but we have been told and even discussed earlier that nobody is immune to mental illness. Anytime you're suffering mental illness, you're taking care of a person with mental illness. One thing that is our comfort as Christians is that we know that we are not alone. We can get that from many books in the Bible. I'll refer us even to Isaiah 41:10. It says, "Fear not, for I am with you. Be not dismayed, for I am your God, and I will strengthen you, I will help you, and I will uphold you with my righteous hand." We have also seen that many times people would think that it is the fault of the person that is suffering from mental illness. And we are given the example of the blind person. Although the blind man that Jesus Christ healed, blindness is not a mental illness, but it is an illness, or it's a problem that the disciples were asking if, or people were asking if the person had done something wrong. And sometimes people who are suffering mental illness would ask, they would look around for what wrong they did. And it is not only people who are suffering from mental illness. Even when you have gone through a problem for a long time, sometimes you may think that you're being punished for something you did. But we are being encouraged that it doesn't have to be our fault. We are also drawing our comfort from the fact that God sees us and is with us. And He says that He will always protect us. He will not leave us alone. And His word really needs to speak to us. And as I finish, I would say that there is hope, as it is said in the book of Job. There is hope for a tree. Even though it be cut, it can still sprout again. So those who have mental illness, those who have problems with mental illness, those who are taking care of people with mental illness, there is hope. There is hope in Jesus Christ, because that is what we are expected to see as people of the community of faith. And so I will end there, even as Preskilla takes us through the session of question and answer. Back to you, Preskilla.
Wow. Thank you, Sylvia. I don't know if the other listeners are as touched as I am. That letter was so profound, and I think it basically just summarizes how we should handle each other in the church, in the Christian community. So I will open up the session for Q&A questions so that we can take some questions. I don't know how much time we have, Mr. Gakuo. Mr. Gitao, I don't know how much time we have, but we'll take as many questions as we can. Okay. So I think I'm going to stop sharing my screen, but I'll just leave you with a quote before I stop sharing. Never give up on someone with a mental illness. Just like that person in the letter was saying, don't dismiss me. I am still who I am. I just need you. So this quote goes on to say, when I is replaced by we, illness becomes wellness. So we can support each other even the people who are struggling with mental illness, they still have a place. Remember, that person in that letter says that they have been gifted with creativity. So when their ideas are dismissed just because they have this mental illness, you can imagine how it breaks them. But when we embrace them, then they can still feel like they are part of this congregation, they're part of this community, and they are still valued. So I will stop sharing, and let's remember that to replace the I's with the we's in the church, so that those who are struggling can experience the wellness that comes from belonging to a Christian body. So I open up the session to any questions that may be there.
Fantastic, Preskilla. Thank you very much. So I'm just going to see anybody who's got a question or a comment. Go on. I'm going to scoot around.
Preskilla, my question is to you. During the presentation, you had a list of sort of, I don't know if I call them attributes or symptoms of somebody who is, having, mental illness issues. So my question is, how many things do you keep track of to know when you need to intervene? Like when, okay, this is now becoming something serious. Because I think there was the withdrawing, there was the change of diet, or sorry, of what's it, appetite.
Appetite.
And so what combination of those symptoms do you get to decide, okay, fine, now this is where I need to actually do something?
Okay. What I would say is the moment you notice any of the changes, any of the symptoms, do something about it. So it's just something that now we ask, what something? Because all the psychological disorders or mental illnesses have like a cluster of symptoms that you have to meet for you to even be diagnosed with. For example, depression. Going through stress, the regular stress can make you lose your appetite for 2 3 days. You can be lethargic for 2 3 days, but that does not mean that you go see maybe even a psychologist. Just talking to somebody. So for me, anytime you notice any of the symptoms that we listed, just beginning, talk to somebody, do something. There's something that you can start doing, is talk to somebody, talk to a friend, talk to a father, talk to an auntie, talk to an uncle, talk to your pastor. I'm feeling this, for the last 2 3 days I've been feeling this, or for the last 1 week I've been feeling this. Then explore it. If they cannot support you, if they cannot help you, I am sure they can direct you to a place where you can get the help that you need. But then there are some symptoms that I put in a corner, if you remember, that if you experience any of those symptoms, you need psychiatric support immediately. So if you are seeing somebody who has these symptoms, then you can either help them to get to a psychiatric whatever center, or see a psychiatrist, or even if it's you can shout the alarm that, hey, I need help. And these symptoms were anytime you get to have thoughts of harming yourself, that's a danger zone, or harming somebody, that's danger. And I always tell people that, in our chats, we hear somebody saying, oh, I can kill myself. I just feel like killing myself, and people just dismiss it like, hey, stop talking like that. That is serious. Somebody who is talking about suicide will eventually commit suicide. So anytime you're thinking of harming yourself, or somebody who is talking about harming yourself, that's a danger zone. The other thing that is a danger zone is when you're hearing voices, you're seeing things that are not there. That's danger. That one needs immediate medical attention. When you're seeing your thoughts are really wavering, like your thinking has changed, even your speech, even your writing has changed, or a sudden drop in your performance, or sudden personality changes. So this is the cluster of things that, or symptoms that you really need to seek emergency medical, psychiatric medical care. But for the others, like, for example, when you're stressed, when you're highly stressed, let's say you're working in an office where you're highly stressed, or maybe as a young person, you've broken up with your girlfriend, for example, if you're dating, or as a spouse, you are fighting, you're having like conflict, that can cause your stress levels to go high, and that can affect your concentration, it can affect your sleep patterns, it can affect even your appetite, it can even affect your energy levels. But as soon as you solve that issue, then you just go back to normal. And as long as you know where your source of problem is and that is causing the changes, then you're in the safe zone. But if things are happening to you and you can't explain, or you're not very clear why you're feeling the way you're feeling, that's a danger zone, plus the symptoms that I've talked about. So I don't know if that answers your question. Okay. Yes.
They have these issues, but let's say specifically they don't want to talk to you. So as a Christian, I'm sure the number one thing is, of course, to just pray and submit it to God in prayer. But are there any
Yeah.
other more practical sort of things that we can do to help somebody who either is in denial or just does not want your help specifically?
Okay. Sylvia, do you want to take that?
Yeah, I can take that. We know that when people are going through depression or mental illness, sometimes it's scary. It's something that we do not want to discuss because sometimes we don't even understand what's going on. So you may want to know what's wrong with me, but maybe I also don't know what's going on. So I don't want to talk about it because I don't even have answers. Or sometimes I have realized what's going on, and because of the stigma around it, or I've not even wrapped my mind around it, I do not want to talk about it. But if you have realized that this person is going through this rough time, maybe there are symptoms or you're seeing things that, for example, if just as Preskilla said, there is this person seeing things which are not there. Maybe it's a family member or a friend, but every time you're walking, they're asking if it's raining, for example, and yet, or they're saying it's raining and there's no rain. And another time they're saying something and you begin to wonder, hey, could there be a problem with this person? Sometimes the best thing to do, we have said it's important to pray for them and with them as Christians, but sometimes if you are trying to have a conversation with such a person and they are not ready to speak about this, then the best thing to tell them is, I understand that you could be having an issue or a problem, and I am here. Anytime you're ready to talk, you can talk to me. And if there's certain words of encouragement that you could have, maybe you could just tell them, or you can even resort to writing a text to them about just helping them understand the situation in which they are. So if sometimes they may want to learn more, or they may want to listen, but they do not want to speak. So you can even write a text to this person with all that you wanted to say, making sure that you do not judge them, making sure that you do not say the things that would hurt them more. So if there's something that you needed to encourage them about and they do not want to talk to you directly, if you write a text, for example, or an email, they would read it. And if there is something in that is able to help them, it can help them more than if you talk to them personally, face to face, because sometimes it is so overwhelming for people who are mentally ill to be talking to somebody face to face. So they may read that text, they may not tell you that they have read it, they may not even answer, but I'm sure they will read that text and it could be able to help. That's what I think one of the things that we could do. Preskilla, if you have something that we could do with these people.
Yeah, I can add, and I can probably, I don't know what, maybe if there was an example, but the best example where people are normally in or usually in denial is especially substance use and abuse. And they'll tell you that, no, I don't have a problem with alcohol. I can stop anytime I want. So in such a case, I would encourage you as the person working with them, of course, as a Christian, keep praying for them. But again, don't stop badging, don't stop bothering them, don't stop, be persistent and keep reminding them, because more often than not, when people push us away, don't ask me about that, don't talk about that, I'm good, I'm okay. We, as human beings, we tend to just pull away and let it be because we don't want to ruin that relationship. But I would encourage you just to be persistent, just be persistent, tell them, I'm not going anywhere, and I'm not going to sit back and see you destroy your life. I'm going to keep talking even if you hate me. I'm going to keep telling you this. You need help. So that's one way. That's an example of substance use. The other example would be someone who's going through maybe something else like depression, and they're in denial, or any other mental illness like you've put it. There are cases where you need family intervention or intervention of somebody else. This is acceptable even in the psychological world, in the psychological practice, where you bring family now to intervene. So and so, you, of course, you surround the person, if that is possible. You tell them, we've seen this, we've seen this, we've seen this. You need help. You know, this has to happen. We have to take action because we don't want you to reach this particular point. So that's an example. The other extreme would be where somebody is harming themselves. You know somebody who is cutting, and you talk to them and they're telling you, they're in denial. They're like, I'm good, I'm fine. You Now, anytime somebody wants to harm themselves, you are mandated, even as psychologists, we are mandated to break the confidentiality. So you need to report that person. If you are maybe a sibling or a friend, you need to report them to a higher authority, a father, a teacher, or somebody who can now take the legal action that needs, because now the law allows us to come in and get this person to get psychiatric help. So I hope that covers all the areas where somebody would be in denial or somebody would not know what to do in the case where they have issues and they're not facing up to it.
Fantastic. Anybody else who's got a question or a comment? No? Good. I mean, for me, I think the session has been about the awareness of mental illness and all health. Mental health is also part of our health. And I think there's two things that you've brought out in terms of helping us to care for ourselves. That is important. And that self-awareness, knowing when things are potentially going wrong and you're feeling, this is becoming overwhelming. But also what you've helped us, and Sylvia as well, is to help us to learn how to care for others. And I liked the comment that Sylvia made, don't be quick to offer your opinion. You're not a mental health expert. That is so important, because sometimes what that person needs is just somebody to listen to. And so, that is helpful. And in terms of caring for ourselves, some of the stuff you've mentioned about, exercise, going out for a walk. I never knew until I was reading some research how sunlight actually really improves mood and is a big factor in terms of mental health. It's very, very simple things. So, in Africa, you people are blessed because you have got the sun more often than we do. Unless there's anybody else who has got... Jackie, you got a comment? Yeah, I think... You need to use this, otherwise nobody will be able to hear you. I can bring it to you.
Thank you very much. I think for me, what what always discussing this is that awareness and that awakeness and that realization sometimes of things we have looked at all through our lives. We've been growing up, working, and then now when you get expert information like this, it's almost like you're nodding your head and, okay, now I see, now I understand. And I think we've had this, and I think I will need some time to process it again before we have another conversation. Because the questions that I have would be much more, okay, now that I know this, and one thing that I'm so aware of is sometimes when we have this sort of conversations or these discussions, it does awaken things in us, in people, and it's almost like, okay, that caring of ourselves, I think we also need to have a conversation, okay, when I hear this or when I've seen this, so how do I deal with this again? Because awareness is one thing, but now that I know this, and it's almost, okay, I'll just use that, like trauma. So now I've gone back to a place, and maybe that trauma has been reawakened or triggered. So how do we deal with that? Just, again, and I'm thinking that's a bit of self-care as well. Yeah.
For me, thank you so much for the information for today, especially bringing it to church, knowing that I think mental health is never spoken in churches. And I think sometimes what has really made me think is when I think you said we tend to tell people, oh, why don't you pray harder? Or you shouldn't be experiencing mental health because you're a Christian or you're a born-again Christian. You have God in you. And I think the way you put it, like if somebody has cancer and is in church, we are there praying for them and we realize they have cancer. We realize they have this certain illness. But when it comes to mental health, I think people are pushed aside. And I'm also putting myself in the same boat, telling somebody else, oh, you'll be fine. You just need to pray. I mean, get over it. But this is something that has enlightened me today, that which needs to be spoken in churches. And I think this message needs to go to so many churches, knowing that people may be suffering in silence and we don't even know because we are scared of talking about it. We are scared of saying, like, I feel this way or I feel that way because I think I'm going to be judged. So I feel really enlightened today, and I think there's something that I've taken out of this discussion, and thank you so much.
Thank you.
Fantastic. So Jackie has mentioned about trauma, which one of the things we were discussing is whether we could talk about it on Tuesday. Because I think it also connects to what Sylvia mentioned. No, I think you mentioned it in the letter. My emotions cannot be trusted. And emotions play a big role with traumatic experiences. So I wonder whether those are things we can sort of try and unpick a bit on Tuesday in terms of the impact of trauma and how do we deal with trauma specifically. I think that would be really helpful. But I think, the feedback I'm getting is, people are appreciative of what you have presented to us, Preskilla and Sylvia. I can't help my mind wandering, Sylvia, because there's a particular nice restaurant in Nairobi called Osewe. Are you in any way connected to Osewe? Because if you were, I was going to just, speak for myself and say that the next time I'm in Nairobi, I am going to say, I know the people who are in this place, so you treat me well.
Okay, I don't actually own the place, although the person who owns the place is a person I know. We come from the same place, so
that is enough for me, Sylvia. That is just enough for me. I'll go there and say, I know somebody who knows the owner. So. Yeah, so, fantastic. We are really grateful for your time. We are really grateful for giving yourselves to come and talk to us. Apologies for just the technological challenges we've had in the morning, but I think I speak for all of us when I say, it's really been
No
nice
problem.
and really good. So thank you very much. And we look forward again to doing this on Tuesday and perhaps doing it a bit more regularly just to help people. I liked what you said about mind muscle, and I think it speaks about building resilience, having,
Absolutely.
how you are able to overcome challenges and things in life so that they don't put you down, they don't knock you into depression, into dysfunction, but actually you are able to recover and overcome, because those are the things that help us in life when we deal with challenges and we're able to move on from them. So once again, Preskilla and Sylvia Osewe, thank you very, very much. Unless there's anything else.
Thank you.
Hold on.
I think it's also just a pointer that can be picked up on Tuesday and in future sessions. Being Christians in the church, people who are faith, spiritual, I would also like us to have this conversation about spirituality and mental health, and just, it's part of our education, and how will we tease out, and are there any boundaries that we should know about, and things like that. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Jackie.
Thank you.
Very good. Should we finish by just praying together, and then it's 1:45 now here in the UK, so we're desperate to go and have lunch, some of us. So
Okay.
but thank you anyway. Thank you very much. Let's just pray.
Thank you. Okay.
Our Father, we want to thank you because as Jesus came, he said, "I came that you may have life and have it more abundantly." And Lord, thank you for the lessons that we have learned from our two dear sisters about how to help us to enjoy the abundance of life that has come to us through Christ. Lord, we pray for ourselves and we commit ourselves to you, that, Lord, you will help us to cultivate good mental health. Help us, Lord, to care for ourselves. Help us, dear Father, to learn how to deal with adversity, to learn how to deal with stressful situations in our lives. But also, Lord, help us to reach out to people who are also struggling with issues in their lives. Father, I pray that you help us not to be judgmental. You help us not to carry around negative attitudes regarding mental illness and people who may be struggling with mental illness. I pray that, God, you would help us to build resilience in us. That, Lord, just as we were reading today, that you are still our protector, you are our savior, and you are our healer. And I pray that you will keep our minds in perfect peace, and you help us to keep our minds stayed on you. We pray for our sisters in Nairobi. May you protect them, bless them as they serve and minister to others in Nairobi and in schools, in workplaces. Dear Father, we call upon you to bless them as well. And even for us, dear God, as we continue with life, even here with lockdown, with very restricted sort of movements and interactions, Lord, help us to build resilience, to trust you, and to move forward in faith and confidence that you have all things in your hands and that you're working together. Everything that we're experiencing, you're going to work them out for our good. So we bless you as we start another week. Be with us and bless us in Jesus' name. Amen.
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 So
Amen.
we're going to say bye-bye for now, Preskilla and Sylvia. Thank you so much. We really appreciate
Thank
it.
you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
It is
Bye.
lovely. Thank you
All
very
right.
much. Have a blessed afternoon.
See you,
Bye-bye.
and we'll see you on Tuesday.
See you on
Yes, at
Tuesday.
10 p.m. our time.
10 p.m. your time, yeah. We will
Yeah.
wake you up.
No, we will not be asleep.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. God bless you.
All right.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye. Thank you all. Thank you all.
Yeah,
Yeah.
right.